Thank you for coming back. Before we broke, I told you that I was going to mention what I believe to be the 7 signs of good religion, and the 7 signs of true religion. So far, I think we know 5 of them now. The first one is that true religion must be relevant to the needs of the age. 2, it must be in harmony with science and reason. 3, it must be the cause of unity. 4, it must be pure, divine in origin and pure, and that doesn't have any man-made doctrines or teachings. And 5, it must be based on the belief that truth, religious truth as well as scientific truth, is relative, not absolute. Okay, these are very important elements. If you do not believe that truth is relative, you will not see any new truth. This is true in the world today. You know, if you think that you know everything and there's nothing more to be known, then if new knowledge comes, you would just not see it. It's also true of religion. If religious truth comes and there's more, you won't see it if you think that you don't need it, because all truth is contained in the little box that you have. The 6th principle, and I really think it should be the first, because it's probably the single most important principle of what makes true religion, and that is that it must affect the actions of its followers. It must have an effect not on the belief of the followers necessarily, but on the actions of the followers. This is a very important concept. In other words, if religion does not cause a change or a transformation in other people that are its followers, what good is the religion? Would you agree? What good is the religion? In other words, the sign of a good religion is that it affects the actions. When I say the actions, I say there's a distinction between belief and action. I want to read you a statement from Arnold Toynbee, who was writing about religious history, for thousands of years. He said, the equation of religion with belief is a rather recent idea. Okay? In other words, it's only fairly recent that we think that religion is something people believe. Whereas in his study of history, religion was what people did, what they acted upon. So he's making a very profound observation that somehow in the 20th century, we define religion by what people think or believe. Now when Abdu'l-Baha came to the West, when he was in London, someone asked him the question, what is a Baha'i? What does it mean to be a Baha'i? This was a question that a reporter, I think, asked him. And this is very interesting because most of us think, well, what is a Christian? Well, they believe in Christ. What is a Muslim? Well, they believe in Muhammad and the Quran. In other words, we define religions by what they believe or who they believe in. So when Abdu'l-Baha was asked this question, he didn't say that was the answer. I would have thought he would have said, oh, a Baha'i is someone who believes in Baha'u'llah. In fact, he said the exact opposite. In answer to that question, what is a Baha'i? He said, it makes no difference if one has heard of Baha'u'llah or not. If someone loves mankind, serves mankind, works for the betterment of the human race, he is already a Baha'i. And he said in this place and in other places, he said, if one does not do that, even if someone has called themselves a Baha'i for 50 years, if they do not love mankind, serve mankind, work for unity, they are not a Baha'i, and they have no right to the name, he said. He said they have no right to the name. In other words, he's not defining Baha'is by those who believe in Baha'u'llah or in his teachings. He's defining Baha'is by their action. And then he said something very interesting. He added at the end of that, he said, an ugly man can call himself handsome, but he fools nobody. And then I was scared for 2 reasons. I said, thanks a lot, Abdu'l-Baha, you got me scared now. So now I wonder who's a Baha'i and who's not a Baha'i. Because by Abdu'l-Baha's definition, it has nothing to do with who you say you believe in or what you believe in and so on. Many people are professional believers. They go around believing things. They go to a meeting, they nod their head, and they feel really good that they believed. And they go home thinking, I'm so proud of myself because I believe. What does it matter what you believe? Have any of you ever made a New Year's resolution? You ever made a New Year's resolution? And you feel really good as you're making it. Because maybe for a moment you think, oh, well, I'm going to do that. And then does it always happen? Because there's a big gulf between action and belief. You understand that? Belief is inadequate. You must also carry it out. And if religion doesn't cause a transformation in its followers, it's not true religion in my opinion. And that's true even of the Baha'i faith. If the Baha'i faith is not able to change your character, Baha'u'llah says if transformation does not occur in followers, he says the futility of God's manifestation will be apparent. So he's basically saying, if you are a follower of Baha'u'llah and you do not transform, you're going to make Baha'u'llah appear futile. So you're going to make him appear, because what's the point, really? You have to agree. Now, Abdu'l-Baha, in one of his statements, said that you can classify religion or faith into three categories of religion. Kind of like category 1, category 2, category 3. Maybe like hurricanes or typhoons, you know how there's categories? You can't just say, well, you have a category 1 typhoon. You have, well, how many categories do you have of typhoons? 5. 5? Oh, really? I thought you had like 12 or something. Anyway, in America we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and so on. So otherwise, there's different categories of religion. So the first kind of religion is the religion of your family, or your background, or your race, or your country. You know, people that are, I come from a Muslim background or Muslim country, that's why I'm a Muslim, or a Christian, or Hindu, and so on. And that's one kind of religion, one category. Abdu'l-Baha referred to that as weak traditional faith. One kind of religion. Probably the majority of the world are that category. Category 2, he said, is those people that study and understand and come to accept the teachings of the founder of that faith. You know, they study Jesus and the Bible, or they study the Quran, and they accept it, and they believe it. And that's the second category of religion. Abdu'l-Baha says it is good, but there's something better. That's the third category of religion, which he says is the religion of practice, the religion of action, where you actually do what they say. And according to Abdu'l-Baha, that's the only true religion. The only true religion is the religion of action. So if the Bible says to love your fellow man, and to turn the other cheek, and to love everyone as your enemies, and to forgive everyone, and someone in the name of Christianity is attacking other countries, or not forgiving, or condemning certain people, or so, that's not really the same thing. It's only category 1 or 2. Category 2 is where you actually carry out. So who is a true Christian? Who is a true Muslim? Who is a true Hindu? Well, Abdu'l-Baha said in his talks in America, he says, those that truly follow the teachings of Christ are Baha'is. Those who truly follow the teachings of Muhammad are Baha'is. In other words, anyone who... One man wrote and apologized to Abdu'l-Baha, and he said, I'm a Christian, because he wanted to say, and Abdu'l-Baha wrote back, he said, those are blessed words. He said, if only everybody were true Christians. You see, because according to Abdu'l-Baha, religion has nothing to do with belief alone. It has everything to do with translating that belief into action. So true religion must affect its followers. And if Baha'is want to change the world, they need to learn that too. That it's not what we... Often we say, okay, what is Christianity? And we define it by what do Christians believe. What is Islam? We define it by what Islam believes. Now we have to say, what do Christians do? What do Muslims do? What do Baha'is do? This is the sixth principle of good religion, that it has an effect on the actions of its followers. Now the seventh is that true religion must be able to unite all of the other religions. It must be able to unite all of the other religions, but in a certain way. It must be able to unite all of the religions not by force or coercion, but merely by the knowledge and the recognition of the truth that all the religions are one to begin with. Okay, we can't force Hinduism and Buddhism and Christianity and Islam and Judaism. We can't force them by coercion. The only way you can unite them is to get them to recognize that they are one. Now, Baha'u'llah says that there's only one religion, there's only one God. He says this is a changeless faith of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. So there is only one religion. In other words, to become a true follower of religion, one recognize that the family religions are all one. I had a friend of mine, his name was Hank. I just saw him about 4 or 5 weeks ago in Los Angeles. He's an old man. I don't know exactly how old, but I'm guessing he's at least 75 years old or more. And he told me the most interesting story. He said that he got a letter from some woman in Chicago who was in her 50s and said, I think you're my father. I've been adopted all my life, and I never had a father, but we've been doing research and this and that, and internet and DNA, and we've narrowed it down, and I think you're my father, could you get a DNA test? Okay, because he lived at the right time in Chicago in the 1950s. All those things were right, and he had the right. So he went and got a DNA test, and she had her DNA, and they compared it, and he was her father. And at the age of 75 or 80 years old, he found that he had a daughter that he never had. And I said, well, how do you feel? He says, I'm so happy. Yeah, I said, have you seen her? He says, oh yeah, we talk every week on the phone. She came out to California. We spent Christmas together. It's like a daughter I never had. You know, she's like in her 50s. And he embraced her and accepted her as a daughter, and he felt so happy. It's a beautiful story the way he told it. And we have to learn and realize, as followers of Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, that we also share the same religious DNA. Because he wouldn't have accepted just any old woman off the street to be his daughter and treat her the way he did if he didn't have the knowledge that was proven scientifically that she actually was his family. But when she did that, it completely changed. His attitude towards her became completely different to someone that he didn't have that knowledge. Unless people can have that knowledge that all the religions are one family, they all have the same DNA, you can unite them. He was not united with this woman by coercion or force. He was united by recognition of the truth that he was one family with her. It's recognition or knowledge of the truth that you are one family. And so all religions, we must understand that to become a Baha'i, if you're a Muslim, or a Christian, or a Hindu, or a Buddhist, you are not turning from your religion. You are returning to your religion. This is basically the first concept, that to become the follower of all religions, you're not turning from your religion, you're returning to the true essence of your religion, the essence of the divine authority that the religion had, shorn of all the dogmas and the superstitions and man-made documents, because this is the changeless faith of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. Now, if a religion ever comes to the world and has all 7 of these qualities, then it can have an effect on the transformation of the human race. And I suggest to you that the Baha'i faith may actually contain all 7 of these elements. All 7 of these elements. And it can unite all of the religions of the world if we profess these kind of things. But we must practice that 6th one, which is the effect on our characters. Now, someone just said to me that you cannot prove scientifically that prayer works. Okay, you cannot prove, because it doesn't seem to make any sense. You know, where is God? Is that right? Someone can also say you cannot prove that God exists, or you cannot prove that the soul exists. You cannot, in other words, there are many things that are within religious doctrine that cannot be proven from a scientific standpoint. Is that right? How many agree with that? Come on, raise your hand. It cannot be proven. Now, basically what this is saying is that, let's imagine we have a box, and there's all this knowledge in the box. And you only have within you what's in the box to prove anything that's in the box. And someone comes along and says something's outside of the box. Someone says something's outside of the box. And they say, but how can I prove something outside of the box when I'm only using the tools that are within the box? So this is actually a contradiction in terms. It's actually, there's a name for this kind of philosophical argument. It's called the non-overlapping demand. Have you heard of that term? You can look it up on the internet. Non-overlapping demand. In other words, there's a certain demand that religion is talking about that cannot possibly be proven within this physical domain. Imagine you lived in a box, and someone said, you know, never go to the edge of the box. You know, never go anywhere near the edge of the box. Stay in the box. Your parents say stay in the box. And let's say one day a kid comes to you and says, we're going to go to the very edge of the box. And you say, I can't go, my parents are worried. Come on, it's fun. So you go all the way to the edge of the box, and you put your ear up against the end of the box, and you hear some sound. Say you hear some sound. And you think, well, there might be something outside the box. Maybe you hear the sound, it's your dead grandfather. I don't know, I'm just making it up. Okay, so you go back to your parents and say, I went to the edge of the box. And say, why did you do that? There's nothing else except in the box. And you say, yes, but when I got there, I heard something outside the box. Say, it's nonsense, it can't be heard. This is basically the argument right now, that science is looking within the box and religion is saying there's a domain that doesn't overlap. However, Let's get something clear. If something is outside the box and it has absolutely no effect on what's inside the box, then who cares? Whether it's there or not. Unless something from outside the box can affect what's inside the box, we can't see it. And science is very well aware of the fact that things are not known, but their effect can be measured or recognized. For example, ask any scientist if he knows what gravity is. Go on, go ahead, ask anyone here study physics?
Yeah.
Okay, ask any scientist, self-respecting, if you know what gravity is. We have absolutely no idea. We haven't a clue what it is. We just measure its effects. What it is, where it came from, how it works, you know, how it was caused, how it was created, we don't know. In fact, gravity is one of the least understood of all forces in the universe. Okay, we don't understand it, but we can measure it, we can quantify it, we can say it's there. Right now, science has discovered the effects, based on cosmology, they've studied the effects of the way in which the galaxies are receding and the way in which they're cohering, and they have worked out that basically 96% of the universe, they don't know what is there. Okay, 96%. In other words, what we could see, according to them, is 4%. The other 96%, they say it must be there, but we don't see it, we can't touch it, we can't hear it. So we're going to call that 96% dark matter and dark energy. Now, dark matter and dark energy are just words for something we don't know anything about. But it must be there because its effects can be observed on the way in which the other 4% hold together or recede. Do you understand that? So now, is science not saying that if you could see the effect of something, even if you can't prove its existence, then it must exist? At least in theory. Would you agree? Okay. So this is very important stuff. And science has been doing this all along. They observe something, and they say, this is happening. There must be a force somewhere behind that. That's behind that. We don't know what it is, so we'll call it dark. Okay? You see what we're getting? Now, originally, science said, some scientists said that God exists because there are many things that cannot be explained. And since they can't be explained, there must have been a creator. Okay, back in the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, even the age of reason, many scientists said that God must exist because there's a whole range, a whole bundle of things that are kind of like dark matter, dark energy. But gradually, they figured out how to explain a lot of those things. So they developed a concept called God of the gaps. God of the gaps was a concept that said that if there's a gap in our knowledge of how something came, then we can make God. Because if we have no other explanation, we can make God. And now science says God of the gaps is a useless, stupid, ridiculous argument because it's just superstition. It's just that whenever you don't know something and you can't prove it, you call it God. Okay, so this is, if you talk to any scientist, they God of the gaps. Now, you say, but hold on, you scientists now, the current, what they call the standard model of physics, has 96% God of the gaps, but they call it dark energy and dark matter. But why are they allowed to do that? Who can tell me why? Why are they allowed to create something that doesn't exist and it can be taught in science books?
The unknown, something that they haven't quite identified.
But why are they allowed to do it?
Because they will identify one and they think that they're
Oh, they're looking for it. Yeah, you can get a lot of money from your government if you say, I want to find dark matter or dark energy, but no one's found it yet. Why are they allowed to believe it? Because there is evidence that something is doing something and it's having an effect. Now maybe they'll look for it and they'll find it's different, but they know that something must be there. This is also true. Religion can never be scientifically proven unless and until its followers have an effect in the world that can be easily quantified and observed. In other words, do not expect someone through rational argument to ever believe in prayer or in religion or God or anything like that. Don't expect them to prove it to them. The only way you can prove it is by effect on you and by action. In other words, if religion comes and it unites a whole nation, and that nation or a community or a city, and you can see that they prosper in their development and they're happy and they're living lives and there's less suicide and there's more stability, then that is scientific according to any definition of science. That is scientific. But if you don't have an effect, it's not scientific. So unless and until there's transformation of the human race through religion, these scientists, these physicists, and these new atheists that are writing for science, they will never turn to religion. But they will be the first to turn to religion if they see an effect. Because they already have a lot of faith in a lot of things that don't exist, that they're not sure about, like dark matter and dark energy and so on. So it's very important to understand that we need to be scientific in our understanding of religion. If religion is doing you no good, if it's doing you no good or your friends no good, then you're not being scientific if you just keep persisting on it. You know, they said that Einstein said it, but I don't think it was Einstein. But they quote, they say, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. You know that saying? I don't think Einstein said it. There's another saying that they said, if nothing changes, nothing changes. You know, there's various statements that basically they explain the concept that if you keep doing something and it's not really having an effect, then what's the point of it? So we're going to study this principle over the next few days because we have a talk on human transformation and spirituality and so on. But basically, the uniting of science and religion means that we need to find a balance in our lives between the material and the spiritual. And the first step is recognition of the fact that you are a spiritual being. This is the first step. Until you realize you're a spiritual being, you're not going to get anywhere. Now, how many of you are familiar with the philosopher Teilhard de Chardin, the French Jesuit philosopher? Considered the greatest philosopher, religious philosopher perhaps of the 20th century. He wrote a book called Phenomenon of Man. And there's one statement in that book that now in America they put on bumper stickers. It says, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. In other words, that we are not, you know, a physical body that's trying to be spiritual. We're a spiritual body that's been pulled into the material world. Right now, you are a spiritual being. Your spirit defines you. Your body is just a vehicle that your spirit is driving in like a car, and you can get out of the car and walk away, you can get out of your body and walk away. Don't try it tonight. You can all do it. But at the moment, how many of you feel you're in the spiritual world? You do. Okay, but if you knock on the table, you're in the physical world. You wake up, when you're hungry, you're feeling physical things. In other words, the physical world is imposed upon us all the time. And the spiritual world is hidden from us. It's the hidden world. And Baha'u'llah says, in the hidden words, he says, wert thou to behold the spiritual world. He said, wert thou to behold the mortal, thou wouldst strive to pass from this fleeting world. But to show you one and to hide the other is a mystery which none can comprehend. Now you hear what he's saying there? He says, there's a spiritual world, there's a physical world, and we're going to show you the physical world, and we're going to hide the spiritual world from you. And the reason we're hiding the spiritual world from you is a mystery which only the pure in heart can comprehend. And I say, Baha'u'llah, thanks a lot. So I'm never going to understand that, because I'm not pure in heart. Okay? But isn't that an interesting concept? That Baha'u'llah is basically admitting that he's playing a shell game. You know what a shell game is? Like you show one thing in time. So the great shell game of God is he shows you one world, there is another world, and he hides it. But then he says something even more amazing. He says, the world I'm showing you is not real, and the world I'm hiding from you is real. Okay? Isn't that crazy? And then he compares it to the dream in the 7 valleys and in various other places. He said the dream there's so many mysteries in the dream, but the main thing about a dream is while you are dreaming, you think it's real. Isn't that right? While you're actually in the dream. And then when you wake up, you have that strange feeling, oh, it was only a dream, it wasn't real. And now this is the real world. You see? And it says in the Quran, this life is but a dream you awaken upon death. So right now, this physical world is all a dream. And it's not real. And when you die, you'll realize, oh, it wasn't real. It was just a dream. You see? And it's going to happen. Believe me, it's going to happen to every one of you. You don't try and prevent it. It's going to happen sooner or later. You're going to wake up. So really, death is the waking up of a dream and realizing that you're coming into the real world. So every morning, when you wake up, you say, oh, that wasn't real. And now this is reality. And God gives you that experience every single day of your life. Did you know that? Why does He give you that experience every day of your life? Now in reality, we're told that the world that you were in when you were dreaming was the spiritual world. So really, when you wake up, you shouldn't say, that was but a dream, and this is reality. You should say, that was but reality, and now this is my dream again. That's what you should say every morning. But of course, we can't do that. But now, you have some concept that there is a material and a spiritual world, and that we must awaken within this physical world to this reality. And in one of my talks, I called it Seeing the Gorilla. Has anyone heard that talk? I refer to it as Seeing the Gorilla because they did studies where they put a gorilla walking down the street, and they asked people to do something else by concentrating on counting cars. So they said, you concentrate on counting the cars, and the gorilla walked by. And the majority of the people, almost all of them, never saw the gorilla because they were doing something else. Because what happens is that when you focus on one thing, you miss things that are very obvious. In science, this is called unintentional blindness. That we don't see everything that exists because we don't focus on it. We don't concentrate on it, so we miss a lot of things. And there are a lot of psychological studies that do that. So at the moment, we're focusing too much on the physical world. We're thinking too much about our material pleasure and our own comfort and our own wealth and all of this. And so we're missing things that are really quite obviously there. We're missing the spiritual world. And we don't need to completely turn away from the physical world, but we need, to a certain extent, start seeing the spiritual world. And this concept is called transcendence in some religions, or is somehow becoming aware of the spiritual world. Once you become aware of the spiritual world, you'll also learn that, according to Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha, the spiritual world and the physical world are both representations of the same truth. They're both the same. Abdu'l-Baha calls this the mirror or the reflection principle or the analog principle. In other words, the physical world is a symbolic representation of the spiritual world. And this is why all the teachers of God use the physical world to explain spiritual truth. You notice that? They talk about light and eyes and ears and hearing and so on, and mountains and rivers. Every single thing in the physical world has a spiritual counterpart. So the physical world is a lesson or a classroom to understand principles. And the first thing we learn from science is that the physical world is full of laws. The physical world has laws. Would you agree? The laws are pretty much immutable. How many of you know the law of gravity? Okay, you know the law, so when you step off a cliff, what happens? Okay. Can you argue with it, you know, and say please, no, or something? It's an absolute law, isn't that right? You put your hand in fire, or whatever. There are consequences in the physical world. And we are told, the House of Justice said, just as there are physical laws that govern, you know, what we should do and so on, there are also spiritual laws. And they have just as much consequence. But their consequence is not as immediate. So if I tell somebody the law of gravity or the law of not touching fire, they probably will thank me because they'll see somebody burn their hand or so, and they say, thank you very much. But if I tell somebody a spiritual law, they don't thank me. Okay, in fact, they get out of my face, hate me. So, because the window of when you're told the law until you realize that the law was true is very small in the physical world. It might only be a few seconds. Okay, careful, you're going to trip. Ah, you tripped. Okay, so that was very quick. But if I say, careful, don't do this spiritual thing, you may not know that until the next world. Okay, in other words, this is a different thing. But we are told that just as there are spiritual laws, there are physical laws. According to any science, we know that biological life forms, particularly mammals, they need to get 6 things to stay alive.